All over there, this is Al-24 Midnight News coming to you live from Algiers. And to the headlines. At least 2 Palestinians have been killed and several others wounded on the 4th consecutive day of Zionist raids on the besieged Gaza Strip. Arab Parliament renewed its call on the European Union not to politicize human rights issues and use them as a pretext to interfere in Algeria's internal affairs. Turkey's presidential and paramilitary or rather parliamentary elections on Sunday will have President Recep Tayyip Erdogan facing unprecedented challenges that could end his country rule. After the opposition candidate Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu accused Russia of meddling, the Kremlin has denied all the claims of interfering in Turkey's elections. Hello again and welcome. Starting from the Middle East, the Zionist occupation continued its 4th consecutive day of aggression against the Gaza Strip, with raids and shelling on various areas and agricultural lands. The operation's attack resulted in the deaths of 2 Palestinians and the wounding of others, while the resistance fired rocket shells at the Zionist depths. Hussein Brekan.
The occupation continued its aggression attacks on Gaza for the 4th day, with dozens of raids targeting various facilities and sites and bombing houses. Palestinian sources reported that 2 citizens were killed and others were injured in an airstrike that targeted a residential apartment in Al-Nasr neighborhood, bringing the number of martyrs to 33 since the beginning of the aggression.
We have no place to live in. The house used to be for me, my children, brothers, and my mother. 5 families used to live in this house. Now the 5 families have no shelter and no place to live in. We don't have an alternative residence and no other home. We have nothing. What can we do? We are now in the street. We slept in the street all night.
In response to the occupation's attack, the resistance fired hundreds of rockets at settlements around the Gaza Strip, some of which reached even the occupied Al-Quds. The occupying entity vowed more strikes in response to the targeting and destruction of homes. The Netanyahu government is determined to escalate its aggression in Gaza by stopping the truce talks with the Palestinian factions in the Strip, in an attempt to restore the deterrence that was eroded after the resistance missile destroyed the Iron Dome myth and caused huge losses in the entity's economy.
We hope to reach a truce, to take care of our wounds and the wounded people here. We have to carry out some home duties. I'm responsible for 20 people at home. I am up early to look for food for them. Of course I'm interested in reaching a truce.
The continued aggression against Gaza has resulted in devastating consequences for the Palestinian people, leaving them with little to no resources and lack of basic necessities. The hope of a truce remains a priority for the people of Gaza, who continue to endure the hardships of occupation and aggression.
And a different matter, now the People's National Assembly has condemned in the strongest words the resolution voted on Thursday by the European Parliament regarding the situation of freedom of expression in Algeria, considering it as a blatant interference in the internal affairs of the country. Mohammed Khatul.
The lower house of parliament indicated in a communiqué that it learned with great regret the EU Parliament's resolution, which contains erroneous information and errors which are far from the reality of the media landscape in Algeria, which is dynamic, open and free. It also condemned the resolution, saying it is a blatant interference in Algeria's internal affairs.
We learned with great regret the EU Parliament's resolution, which contains erroneous information and errors, far from the reality of the media landscape in Algeria, which is dynamic, open and free. The People's National Assembly condemns in the strongest terms the content of the resolution and considers the People's National Assembly condemns in the strongest terms the content of the resolution and considers it a blatant and unacceptable interference in the internal affairs of the country.
For its part, the Arab Parliament strongly denounced the communique issued by the European Parliament, calling it a flagrant and unacceptable interference in the internal affairs of Algeria.
The unacceptable and arrogant terms contained in the document represent a flagrant violation of the principles of the United Nations and internal codes and practices, which underline the principle of non-interference in the internal affairs of states.
Meanwhile, the Pan-African Parliament condemns and rejects any interference in the internal affairs of Algeria, recalling that the two continental parliaments agreed that they should consult each other on issues relating to the two continents before taking any resolution or decision.
The Pan-African Parliament condemns and rejects any interference in the internal affairs of Algeria and all African countries, and recalls that the two continental parliaments had agreed in December 2022 in Brussels that they should consult each other on issues relating to the two continents before taking any resolution or decision.
Finally, the People's National Assembly underlined that Algeria is a sovereign country which believes in the principle of equality in its relations with other countries, including the European Union, and in no way accepts the policy of double standards that serves agendas that everyone knows.
The European Commission has cancelled a possible extension of the fishing agreement between Morocco and the European Union, which expires next July and includes illegally occupied Western Sahara. The European Commission has indicated that extending the protocol is not an option before the decision of the European Court of Justice in the appeal case, because the court had cancelled the Council's decision to approve the marine fishing protocol, which means that the temporary termination of marine fishing in Western Sahara seems inevitable. The United Kingdom reaffirmed its commitment to helping all parties achieve a just, lasting and mutually acceptable political solution to the issue of Western Sahara in the context of arrangements consistent with the principles and objectives of the Charter of the Nation of United Nations. A statement from British government following the visit of the British Foreign Minister to the Kingdom of Morocco within the framework of strategic dialogue and subsequent Moroccan propaganda that United Kingdom supports Morocco's proposal to resolve the dispute. The UK reiterated its long-standing position on Western Sahara in support of United Nations resolutions and the importance of their principles, including self-determination. Now, in a different matter, after a week of talks in the Saudi city of Jeddah, Sudan's army and paramilitary rapid support forces signed a declaration that they would work towards a short-term ceasefire in further discussions. Nabil Khazini.
This might be the first good step towards ending the fighting. Both the Sudanese armed forces and rapid support forces signed in the Saudi city of Jeddah a declaration of commitment. The agreement intends to lay the ground for humanitarian assistance to resume and puts talks to reach a short-term ceasefire a priority.
This agreement that came out today as a result of your honest desire that the brotherly Sudanese people avoid the repercussions of ongoing military conflict. This agreement will secure the basic humanitarian aid to the affected, hoping that this honest desire that we sensed in your delegations during the talks would help reach a permanent end to this conflict.
The United Nations, the African Union, and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development welcomed the signing of the Jeddah Declaration by the two disputing parties, urging the two sides to translate these commitments into meaningful action on the ground. The trilateral mechanism called the move an important step towards alleviating human suffering and protecting the lives and dignity of civilians in Sudan.
The UN will spare no efforts to assist in the declaration's implementation and will continue to deliver humanitarian aid, ceasefire or not.
The army reaffirmed its commitment to the last agreement, while the RSF said its delegation had tabled a set of demands in the Jeddah negotiations. The declaration was not a ceasefire. After the signing, both disputing parties returned to fighting. Airstrikes and artillery pounded Khartoum despite committing to protecting civilians and allowing for humanitarian access.
To Europe now, the head of the Turkish Supreme Election Council, Ahmed Yanar, announced on Friday that the initial results of the general and presidential elections scheduled for next Sunday will be announced in the same evening. Yanar said that Council has completed its preparation for the general and presidential elections and has taken all measures to maintain the transparency of the voting process. And to have a clear idea of the Turkish election, I'm joined live by our special envoy in Ankara, Melissa Khimilat. Melissa, hello over there. So, what can you tell us about the presidential race over there, and what are the people's expectations out of this unprecedented challenge?
Yes, Abdulrahim, Turkey will hold presidential and parliamentary elections on May 14th. Elections that are seen as the most important in years and of great international significance. Since we got here to the capital, Ankara, we have noticed a lot of electoral gatherings in Kizilay Street, and that is the main street here in the capital, Ankara. The representatives of the different elections were present. They were trying to have direct contact with the voters. And what we've noticed also is the presence of young people who are very excited and who are given much importance and much interest to the next elections that Turkey will be living in on Sunday. Of course, we're talking about 6 million new voters who are going to participate in the next elections. This is a huge number. They're going to vote for the first time, and their participation in the elections and the size of their turnout is said to be an important factor in potentially swinging the outcome of the vote in a tight race between the current president Recep Tayyip Erdogan and his competitor Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, but both of them have been trying to have the voices
Melissa.
of these young people by different means and by different techniques, especially through social media, and that is to be close to the ideas and close to whatever interests the young people here in Turkey.
Perfectly understood, Melissa Khimilat. Thank you ever so much for this explanation. Melissa Khimilat, you joined us live from Ankara, Turkey. Now, in the same line of thought, difficult challenge for the 3 Turkish candidates who find themselves a few hours before a decisive electoral vote and faced with a sharp drop in Turkish lira value. More in this report.
With figures changing almost every hour, Istanbul is a metropolis that now pulses to the beat of local currency value, just hours before a decisive election that will determine the country's future. For the 3 candidates, parties and coalitions vying for the presidential and parliamentary elections set for next Sunday, the sharp decline in the value of the Turkish lira seems to be a difficult challenge to raise.
The economic situation was critical even before the earthquake. Now it's more than catastrophic. Inflation has doubled a lot. The state says that its rate ranges from 60 to 70%, but the reality is that it has doubled by about twice.
The US dollar was trading against 21.6 Turkish liras on Friday in Istanbul. However, this rate is subject to change at any time. The other persistent issue with the Turkish economy, which would reportedly have a significant impact on the polls, is the country's current hyperinflation. The tourist city of Istanbul feels this in every product, starting with large consumption goods, transportation, and also services, which, according to data from the Turkish Statistical Institute, has topped 60% in April 2023.
today everything has changed because the inflation, the economy goes so badly, and the prices of the food and everything is increasing. It's unbelievable increasing.
Despite traders' concerns that inflation will have a long-lasting effect on the level of spending, many residents in Istanbul remain reluctant and claim wanting to make savings based on their income, which remain the only factor to guide their vote.
And on this topic, we have talked previously to Mr. Rajab Yarmulaz, who is an associate professor of public economics at Ankara Yildirim Bayezid University, about the internal matter of this presidential election and what role the recent earthquake that hit Turkey and the lira crash could play in this race.
In terms of the internal sentiments and internal problems, maybe there will be, because of the increasing tension, there will be some escalations, but if it depends on the outcomes, I guess. If Erdogan wins, maybe the opponent's reaction will be a bit tough and a bit unfriendly, but I believe that after the Erdogan speech, the general balcony speech will give them some relief. If the opponent party will win, this time there will be no reaction among the from the Erdogan supporters' sides, because they believe that this coalition will not last long, because there are many different parties like conservatives, secularists, even socialists, even the HDP, who is the supporter of PKK terrorist organization, and they believe that they won't achieve this coalition much. The economic turmoil is one of the most important supportive policy position of the opponent parties, but they couldn't use it because people are suffering in terms of the inflationary pressure over the country, over the economy.
Also, Mr. Rajab Yarmulaz expressed the unaccepted interference of the Turkish people in the Turkish media, I mean the Western media, in the Turkish matter, especially against President Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Base of reaching people were wrong. I guess that's why they couldn't make a higher support from the government, despite from this inflation pressure over the society. And also in terms of the Erdogan side, they kept their supports from the society because they started to use much of the complementary fiscal policies, which give them more relief in terms of the tax reliefs, for example, tax exemptions and direct subsidies to the vulnerable sections worked a lot over the society. And also the most important part was, again, the promise of political stability. Regarding the other question of the Western outlets' reactions over Turkish elections, they started to intervene like the part of opponent parties, especially Economist.com, for example, acting like the part of opponent parties, and people's reaction are not good for this because Turkish people do not like such interventions, external interventions, especially the Western side. So these interventions keeps increasing the support over Erdogan, as far as I see. These elections will be very important over the region, the Middle East and North Africa, and also the entire world, because if Erdogan will be re-elected, their policy will kept on the Middle East and North Africa, especially Africa policy will kept on. But if the opponent bloc will win, they will directly change the international policies, especially over they keep following the Western backed policies, which they gave already promises. We already seen that they start to blame Russia over some fake tape issues, for example. So it shows us some hints. So the outcomes of the elections will be very much important for the entire region, and hope it will be all good for all of us.
In a related matter, the Kremlin said allegations Russia had interfered in the Turkish presidential election were false and had been concocted by Liras Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, the main election rival of Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, issued a warning to Russia, accusing it of responsibility for the release of fake material on social media ahead of Sunday's ballots. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that people who had passed on such allegations to Kılıçdaroğlu were liars and that Russia valued its ties with Turkey enormously.
We very much value our relations with the Republic of Turkey. We really do, because the Republic of Turkey has so far taken a very responsible, sovereign and thought-out stance on a whole range of regional and global problems that we face. And this position has made a positive impression on us. This is why, of course, a country that values bilateral relations will not do anything with regard to its partners. So we strongly reject such statement of meddling in Turkey's elections. We officially declare that there can be no interference of any kind. And if anyone has provided Mr. Kılıçdaroğlu with this information, they are liars.
Following a decision from Islamabad High Court, former Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan has been released on bail for 2 weeks. The Supreme Court of Pakistan ruled on Thursday the arrest was unlawful and ordered his release from custody. Back to Algeria, and as part of cooperation and cultural exchange between Algeria and Russian Federation, the Algiers Opera ولنبقى organized dazzling performance on Friday evening by the Russian belt troupe Igor Masov for folk dance. The ceremony was marked by a show that depicts various folk dances. The troupe, which made its second performance at Algiers Opera, was founded 98 years ago and is considered one of the greatest folk dance troupes in the world. Now, as a closure of our news bulletin, the defending champion Novak Djokovic defeated unseeded Thomas Martin Echeverry 6-7-6 to 6-2 to start his pursuit for a 7th Italian Open title. By losing his serve in the first game of the second round encounter, Djokovic got off to a rough start. The Serbian, who withdrew from the Madrid Open last month, was seen with a compression sleeve on his right arm, which raised questions about the worrisome elbow condition. The 22-time Grand Slam winner, who had a bye in opening round, also temporarily seemed ill and requested assistance from his team's medical personnel during a changeover. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you ever so much for being with us in this late hour. For better information, you can follow our social media platform. And all I can say at the end, take care of yourself. Good night.